through fire and shadows. In the quiet town of Hollow Creek, David lived a serene life with his cherished daughter, Emma. She was a lively 5-year-old with an insatiable love for fairy tales. One fateful night, David awoke to the smell of smoke and the ominous crackle of flames. Panic gripped him as he realized his house was on fire. "Emma," he shouted, leaping out of bed and sprinting down the hall to her room. Flames licked at the walls, and the heat was intense. David fought through the smoke, his only thought to save his little girl. He burst into Emma's room to find her standing by the window, her eyes wide with fear. "Daddy," she cried, reaching out to him. David scooped her up, wrapping her in a blanket to shield her from the flames. But as they turned to escape, a burning beam crashed down, blocking their path. The fire roared around them, and David knew they had to jump out the window. Just as he prepared to leap, an explosion engulfed the room. Pain seared through his body, and his vision went black. David awoke with a jolt, gasping for air. He was no longer in his burning home, but in a dark, sprawling mansion. The air was icy, and the only light came from flickering candles that cast eerie shadows on the walls. His legs felt weak, and his mind was clouded. "Emma," he called out, his voice echoing through the vast hallways. "Emma, where are you?" There was no reply. David's heart pounded as he stumbled through the mansion, the silence thick and unsettling. The walls were lined with faded portraits of stern-faced figures, their eyes seeming to follow him as he moved. As he ventured deeper into the mansion, he encountered disturbing sights. In one room, a broken music box played a haunting tune, its melody warped and eerie. In another, an old rocking chair creaked back and forth on its own. The atmosphere was heavy with dread, and David's unease grew with each step. "Emma," he called again, his voice shaky. "Daddy's here. Please answer me." He found himself in a long corridor lined with doors, each one slightly ajar. Faint whispers filled the air, but he couldn't decipher the words. He pushed open the first door and peered inside. The room was empty, save for a child's doll sitting in the center of the floor, its eyes lifeless and cold. David moved to the next door, his anxiety mounting. This room was filled with dusty old toys, scattered as if abandoned in a hurry. A chill ran down his spine when he saw a small handprint on the wall, the same size as Emma's. "Emma, please," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Where are you?" He continued his search, each room more unsettling than the last. In one, he found a cracked mirror that reflected not his own image, but that of a twisted, shadowy figure standing behind him. He spun around, but the figure was gone. David's desperation grew. He reached the end of the corridor and pushed open the final door. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a single candle. In the center stood a large, ornate bed, and on it lay Emma, fast asleep. Relief washed over him as he rushed to her side. "Emma, wake up. It's Daddy," he whispered, gently shaking her. Emma's eyes fluttered open, but instead of relief, fear filled them. "Daddy, we have to leave." "They're coming," she said, her voice trembling. Before David could respond, the door slammed shut, and the temperature plummeted. Shadows began to writhe and twist, forming grotesque shapes that crept closer. David scooped Emma up and back toward the wall, his heart racing. The shadows advanced, their whispers growing louder and more menacing. David's mind raced for a way out. In a desperate move, he kicked over the candle, hoping to dispel the darkness. The flame flickered and then flared, casting a blinding light that forced the shadows to retreat. Seizing the moment, David sprinted toward the door, Emma clutched tightly in his arms. He kicked it open and ran down the corridor, not daring to look back. The mansion seemed to close in on them, the walls shifting and the floor trembling. David's relief was short-lived. As he cradled Emma in his arms, the mansion's front door slowly creaked open behind him. He turned to see a faint, ghostly figure standing in the doorway, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. The figure's presence sent a chill down his spine, and he felt an overwhelming sense of dread. "Daddy, we have to go," Emma whispered, her small hand gripping his shirt tightly. David nodded, rising to his feet. He glanced back at the mansion one last time, the sinister aura still palpable. The ghostly figure watched them silently, as if warning them to never return. With Emma in his arms, he started to walk away, each step feeling like a victory over the darkness they had just escaped. As they made their way through the forest that surrounded the mansion, the eerie sounds of the night filled the air. Twigs snapped underfoot, and the wind whispered through the trees, carrying faint echoes of the mansion's haunted past. David kept his focus on the path ahead, determined to leave the horrors behind. Suddenly, a low, guttural growl echoed through the woods. David's heart raced as he looked around, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. Shadows danced among the trees, and his mind conjured images of the twisted figures they had encountered in the mansion. He quickened his pace, clutching Emma even tighter. "Daddy, it's following us," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. David glanced over his shoulder and saw a pair of glowing eyes watching them from the darkness. He broke into a run, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The growls grew louder, closer, as if the creature was closing in on them. Panic surged through him, but he refused to let fear take over. "Hold on, Emma," he urged, pushing himself to run faster. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly, but finally they emerged onto a familiar road. David's car was parked not far away, and he sprinted towards it. He fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking, but managed to unlock the doors. He strapped Emma into her seat and jumped into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut just as the creature lunged from the shadows. David started the engine and sped away, the creature's growls fading into the distance. As they drove, Emma looked out the window, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. David kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the ghostly figure or the creature chasing them. "We're safe now, Emma," he said, trying to reassure both her and himself. "We're going to be okay." Emma nodded, but her expression remained serious. "Daddy, will they come back for us?" David took a deep breath, glancing at his daughter. "No, sweetheart. We're far away from that place now. We'll be all right." As they left Hollow Creek behind, David couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows of the mansion would always be with them. But he knew they had each other, and that was enough to face whatever darkness lay ahead. Together they had escaped the nightmare, and together they would find their way back to the light.